Hey, let's get on to an interesting conversation about our hairless leader. You know how we don't ever hear back from people? Well, I was listening to the Spin-Offs podcast, Gone by Lunchtime, it's their political podcast, and I heard their introduction. Have a listen to the introduction. If it wants to.
For Luxon's request, or his officer's request, for Christopher Luxon to come on their pod.
Hang on.
Luxon's request. There's a whole series popular and very good podcast, Between Two Beers.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
It turns out, and if you look online, there's a whole series of podcasts that Between Two Beers have done in which they tackle the question of whether or not to accept Christopher Luxon's request or his officer's request for Christopher Luxon to come on their pod, which presumably is part of the Christopher Luxon is in touch after all campaign, given the poll that was out this week that showed 51% said he was out of touch.
So Gone by Lunchtime was talking about, and I've seen this Between Two Beers podcast. What happened was Christopher Luxon's team approached Between Two Beers to go on their podcast. I'll play you a couple of clips. They then made a whole show about it. Christopher Luxon wants to come on Between Two Beers. We made a tough decision. Play you a couple of clips. And they first of all made their decision based on they don't do political interviews. They just don't do them. Have a listen.
I remember two of them who said yes had been trying to get
the people who he's talking about. They talked to some political journalists about what they should do. And the 2 out of the 3 political journalists said that we can't get access to him. Not like pissant nobodies like us, but 2 of the 3 political journalists that these guys talked to said that they couldn't get access to Christopher Luxon.
And I remember 2 of them who said yes had been trying to get Luxon on their show all year and said, well, he won't do interviews with us. You've got to take it. Like it's such a good opportunity. But I was also like, well, that's also a reason not to do it.
I think that's when I flipped, when I heard that he hadn't taken the opportunities with political editors or political, what do we call them, political journalists.
Yeah.
That kind of like...
I'll go with old Stephen Shea. Give me a few soft balls.
Yeah, that's it. I was sort of a little bit like, oh, that's not cool. You know, like, because these are really good journalists. Like, I rate them.
So they're talking about him not coming on, and they end up making their final decision.
You know, sending that response back to the Prime Minister's office saying, hey, look, we've had a bit of a think about it. Thanks, but no thanks. Was like, okay. And someone said to me, you are what you turn down, which I really, really liked. And I was like, wow, okay. We have started this podcast in a garage in Hamilton, and now we're turning down the Prime Minister for good reasons.
Yeah.
Like, whoa.
So, you're getting the picture. Christopher Luxon hasn't been going on podcasts or many broadcasts that are of significant length, and that might put him in a position where he has to answer questions. I heard the guys, as I say, from Gone by Lunchtime talking about it. And when they got to the end of that introduction, they said something as well.
Anyway, they grappled with this difficult question of whether or not to have Christopher Luxon on their podcast.
Yeah.
And eventually decided no.
Oh,
after
good for them.
much discussion, that it was that because
Jack,
he would
Jack
tell
Tame
them what suited them.
Yeah.
Well, Jack Tame, but also...
I was going to say Jack Tame
what
would be
about
in
Gone by Lunchtime?
That's right.
So he obviously hasn't gone by Lunchtime, and they've obviously tried. And then they, of course, mentioned Mr. Tame.
We've had many messages from you in recent weeks and months about politicians who are prepared to be interviewed on Q&A. It's now more than a year since Christopher Luxon was last on this show. He's actually never been interviewed on Q&A in his capacity as Prime Minister. We've requested him many times. We've asked his team what dates would suit. We've tried to work in with what is obviously and understandably a busy schedule, but so far he hasn't appeared. Just for the sake of context, we went through our records, and the last national Prime Ministers, Sir Bill English and Sir John Key, were interviewed on Q&A more than 4 times a year on average. During her time as Prime Minister, Dame Jacinda Ardern was interviewed on Q&A twice a year. We think there's democratic value in putting questions to politicians of all stripes, and we hope the Prime Minister agrees to be interviewed soon.
So, no Q&A. And I'm just starting to go, there's a concerning pattern here. I know people who I should mute that because it's going to make noise. I know people who make the Detail. Detail is a newsroom RNZ collaboration, and I phoned one of the producers from that today and asked if he'd been on there, and she went, "Well, we haven't had any politicians on. We don't ask them because we get experts on in their field. So fair enough. They haven't asked. He hasn't gone, and of course, then there's like little know-nothing, no-hopers like us who send emails and stuff and don't get anything. And I find it particularly interesting that there are so many, and this is not us journalists, but journalists, qualified journalists with integrity, speaking to a huge number of New Zealanders every single week or month, or every single day, and he won't go on. He's been on News Talk ZB with Kerry Woodham at least twice, and I just thought, this is an interesting observation, Chewy. Thoughts, sir?
I think it really shows what he's concerned about. We know that he can't handle someone like Jack Tame. Like Jack,
but forget Jack Tame.
A pretzel.
Forget Jack Tame. I mean, I'm not saying we should be at the top of the list, but us, I'm gone by lunchtime.
Well, see, here's the thing. Even us and all of these other people, we're across the politics, right? We follow the stories, the issues as best we can. He's not interested in that. He's not competing in that sphere. What he wants is to be relatable and likable in a way that he's clearly not capable of coming across.
Let me just say one more thing.
So if he goes on a popular podcast to humanize him, this is why we'll see him or hear from him on the Edge Breakfast Show before we'll ever see him on Q&A.
So, but see, here's the thing though. As opposition leader, he was on a year ago. He was on 3 years ago. He was on 2 years ago. There was a full conversation with him on. So it's not like he hasn't been on. He's been on what it looks like at least 4 or 5 times. Yeah, he hasn't been on since he's been the Prime Minister. And like, full respect to the Between Two Beers boys, they actually said, if you listen to that 25-minute episode, they're like, we didn't want to be in a position where we basically let him get away with stuff that we didn't know about to be able to challenge him on. And I'm like, full credit.
That's some good integrity.
Full credit.
Yeah.
But his team, they didn't approach him. His team offered him to them so that he wants to go on that show. Yet the people who want him on, who are in the sphere that relates to him as a Prime Minister, he won't go on. And that's sort of all I've got to say about this. But I guess what I want to do, because I listened to that episode of Between Two Beers a month ago, but it's just now all dropping into place when I hear Gone by Lunchtime go, maybe us. You hear Jack Tame go, anytime you want, Prime Minister. You hear us going, a monthly email that doesn't even get a rejection. It just gets nothing. It's an interesting observation from a man who sets himself up as a leader and a communicator, not communicating with an audience. Talking to my mate over at the Detail, she went, oh yeah, but you guys are the enemy. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, but we're really overt with where we sit politically, and we're fair. And actually, you could also look at it by going, there's hundreds of thousands of people that our content touches each month that he could potentially win over. But nothing.
Well, this is something, right? So we're often critical of people that go on the platform because it's a garbage fire. Yep. But the argument is for people to go on there and talk to an audience that might not think much of them. And there is a segment that you might convince that you actually know what you're talking about, and that there's a different way to do it. Well, that's the same. Luxon hasn't gone on the platform either, to the best of my knowledge.
We checked that, but yep.
But like we're open to people from the government coming on, and yes, we stand against what they're doing. This is the opportunity to try and explain that we're fucking wrong. And to win over our audience potentially, like that's an opportunity, right? You want to stay in government, you want to talk to people that might switch sides. Now, we're pretty polarized, but he has been on the platform.
but it was a year ago, so it might be.
There we go.
It might be
So-
pre-election. The date is. Oh, they don't give a date in here. I go more than they give a date. Yeah, June of last year, so it was pre-election.
Yeah. So as soon as he's prime minister, he's not interested, because it's real easy being an attack dog for an opposition, right? Government's doing everything wrong. We're going to do everything right, and then you become the prime minister, and then the questions change, don't they?
Yeah.
Don't they? He's good at doing sound bites.
Yeah.
He's good at doing. Well, he's not great at doing short interviews or stand-ups or anything like that. He tends to get pissy as the questions continue.
Yeah.
And like, we're not fans of Sean Plunkett, but the man can do a line of questioning, right?
A line of
Sometimes
something.
he has to have a big sit down afterwards. But he could do it.
Can I
But
say
it's
one
the
more?
fact that-
Let me say one thing, because I don't want people to think that we're kind of pissing and saying, "Oh, why don't you come on ours?" I never feel like we deserve anybody's time. Like, we're not entitled to anybody's time. They're allowed to say no. So I'm not trying to say, well, why don't you come on our show? Like, every time I email someone to come on, I always say who we are and what we do and give them links. What's happening more and more now, 9 out of 10 people go, oh yeah, we know you guys. That's happening more now, but I don't make any sort of, I don't guess that they might know who we are, nothing. And I never, ever, ever have an expectation that people have to come on. It's their right, it's their choice. But when you have a prime minister who seems to be showing a trend of not going on anything other than, and again, due respect to the boys from Two Bears, but a fluff piece about his childhood, because I mean that's what they do. They had if you don't know who they are, go listen to their episode with Mark Ellis. It's fantastic. Then you got to start asking questions. Why not? Why not? Forget us. Why not Jack Tame? Why not Gone by Lunchtime? Why not? I kind of interrupted you there, Chewy. Sorry.
No, I haven't taken it personally.
I'll make a sticker
Yeah.
for you. You can get the first one.
Look, this is one of the things. We'll continue asking, because like, some people just like an argument. You don't get into politics because you don't like arguments. You love arguments. You've made it your fucking career.
Yeah.
Like, come on to our show and tell us how we're wrong. Like, everybody loves to be the winner.